Good morning students. In today's class we will be dealing about TS1 Unit 10, that is regarding the informal services in tourism industry. So in the Unit 9, hope you might have understood about the accommodation. So ultimately in the Unit 10 we are going to see the informal services in tourism, and the entire chapter is divided into 3 parts, so that in the first part we are going to understand the type of activities, that is under informal sector what activities are taking place. Then in the second we are going to see the nature of informal sector, and in the third heading we are going to see the productive capital, emoluments and profit, and social factor in the informal sector. So in a developing country, if you want to understand the economic sectors, then we can divide it into 2 parts, namely the formal sector and second one is the informal sector. Because in the developing economy we have to go into the extent in which we can understand. So first we will deal about the formal sector and then we will deal about the informal sector, because in many developing economies, especially the tourism business in the developing economies, it falls under the informal sector. So before understanding what is informal sector in tourism, we will see what is formal sector and what is informal sector. Then ultimately we will learn more about the informal sector of tourism in India. So when we speak about the formal sector, it is the thing which the industries, the modern industries which use the imported technology. Here we use the technology, we use the machines, and we are producing the goods. So once when we speak about the technology or the modern machines, ultimately we need those workers who has knowledge how to operate those modern machines. So they need a discipline and a structured workforce. So they only can handle those machines. They help in using that particular machine, how to use that machine and how to produce the quality goods. So in the formal sector, if you see, we need a disciplined workforce who has a technical idea how to operate the machines, and the mass production take place with the help of technology and machine in case of formal sectors. Then in informal sector, what we are going to understand is the establishment uses the older technology, because it is an informal sector which can be used even by a normal man. He no need any extra qualification to use those technologies. So the older technologies will be used and less machines are used, less technical equipments are used to produce the services or the goods in the informal sector. So this will be the major difference between the formal and informal structure. Things what we are going to understand here is the principles, that is pre-entry will be there. Then mode of production, it depends upon the mode of production. If you use the machine, then it will be under the formal sector, and when we use the normal things, then it comes under the informal sector. So you have to be very careful that the technology will reach us very easily, and because of the technology we can use. So in the formal sector also nowadays a lot of development is taking place through the formal sector rather than the informal sector. It is all because of the technology is moving from one place to another, and so the things can be done very easily with the help of this. We will see the core difference between formal and informal sector here in this slide. So the formal sector, it make use of modern and often imported technology, because it depends heavily on the machines, and often these machines are imported by a country, so that it requires the workforce also like that. Then when the informal sector is concerned, they employ the less machines and the techniques, and older techniques are used. So the case of informal sector, they depends not much on the techniques and they employ the older techniques. So the common man can use those techniques, even if it is a technique based, even a common man can use it. Then the second difference of this formal sector is the sectoral workforce, that structured workforce is required. So they need a proper training how to handle those machines. They have to understand the technology first, and they will be requiring a sort of training, then only they can be employed in the formal sector. So the workers need, or the people those who are dealing those machines, they need certain amount of training in case of the formal sector. In case of the informal sector, the unstructured workforce handle the job. So there is no requirement of training in the case of the workforce involved in the informal structure. So it becomes easy for a normal man to understand certain basic thing, and he can also contribute certain thing in the informal sector. whereas in the formal sector he requires a training, he has to undergo the training, he should have a thorough understanding, then only he can operate it and he can work in the formal sector. Then the third difference is it requires a very high fixed capital, so the huge amount is involved. So it is not easy to get the huge amount, so they have to depend upon a lot of capital either from outside or from inside. They have to generate the capital first, then only they can contribute towards the formal sector. Whereas in case of the informal sector, if you see, fixed capital is low. So with small amount, if I want to start, then I have to think about the informal sector so that I can open a small industry or I can open small something which can contribute towards the informal sector, and slowly then I can make it to work more. So in the informal sector, if you see, you need less technology, then the unstructured workforce, then the third thing is the fixed capital is not that much required. So it is easy for us to start an informal industry rather than the formal sector. So here comes the main differences are. On understanding, we will move further. So once in the informal sector or the formal sector, if you want to understand both the things, then you have to be very clear. The foundations of the formal sector, it requires technology, it requires a workforce, and it requires capital. Whereas in informal sector, it can be done without the help of much of technology or the techniques, or we can say the capital amount which is required to start up the informal sector is very less. On understanding the main difference between formal and informal structure, we will see the informal structure in the sector in the tourism industry. The informal sector in the tourism industry, especially in the developing countries, they didn't gain any importance because the people neglected it to a large extent. They have not considered tourism as an industry in the first case. Now the awareness is going on. So in many countries, tourism is recognized as an industry. So when they recognize tourism as an industry, they are trying to understand the importance of the informal sector in tourism, because tourism is such a business which can give a lot of employment opportunity to both educated and less educated people. It can give employment opportunity to both male and female, and more or less high educational qualification is not required to work in the informal sector of tourism industry, exclusively in the less paying jobs. So nowadays people are concentrating more to generate the employment opportunity with the help of informal sector, especially in the tourism industry. So the developing economies who want to attract a lot of tourists, they are viewing tourism industry as a hope for further business. So they are concentrating more on informal sector of tourism. The ease of entry, that means if I want to start, or if a common man want to start any tourism services or tourism related production, he can start it without the help of much of the capital, and there are also some ethnic affiliation affected to the job which I want to start. So the caste and the ethnic affiliations are also involved in the informal structure, and many people cannot start a particular informal sector job in tourism because of this class, caste and the ethnic affiliation. That means particular community people are allowed to do a particular job. So the people from other community, they cannot enter that much easily. So the restriction of these are available, and so the people are not starting even a small informal sector job in tourism. Thorough understanding of informal sector is very essential for further development. So if you want to cut across, then we have to understand this informal structure and informal sector in the tourism to a correct extent. The self-employed guides are such people where I can provide guide services, or the youth, those who are not having much of the qualification, they can get an idea how to provide the guide services to the tourist visiting such destination. Second job, souvenir business. People in the open air stall, and we can start a small business. We can sell the items which are ethnically produced in that areas, and I can put a shop to sell those items, small paintings or any piece of artwork. All this comes under the souvenir business. The third one is the guest house owner. So if I have certain place, I can build a small guest house and I can put it up for the use of the tourists. That also comes under the informal sector. Then small self-employed entrepreneurs used by tourist agencies such as guides, drivers, etc. all comes under the informal sector. So if I want to start any small business, I can think about these services. The main informal activity in tourism sector is that of lodging and providing restaurant facilities, because the tourists visit a destination during a particular season and they are coming to a place to enjoy. So they will first search about a place to stay. So the lodging and providing the restaurant facility becomes an important thing in the informal sector. So where they will eat, where they will stay, where they will keep their luggage. So if I start something in relation to that particular lodging sector, and if it is in a small manner, as I told, the capital requirement in informal sector is not very big. So you can use 1 or 2 rooms, take the permission and start a lodging service. So it may attract a lot of tourists towards that, and that does not require a lot of capital or a higher education. So in a small manner, if I want to start, then that is possible. Various households throughout the world view this as an easy job, because starting an lodging service or providing some food services through the restaurants, it becomes very easy, because I have already the knowledge how to cook the food. So I can cook the food, or I can provide certain things which will attract tourists towards that particular services. So starting up of informal services or informal sector job is very easy, and almost it requires no investment of capital, because I have all the household items and I am cooking food with the help of the vessels what I am having. So it requires no big investment, or it can also be started and operated successfully with less fixed and working capital. That is the main difference between the formal and informal sector, where the money involvement is very less in case of informal sector. So the people, a common man, if he thinks that I want to earn a livelihood by providing certain services to the tourists, then what he can do, he can start up such businesses in the informal sector, and that too in the core tourism industries area, where the people are visiting more in number. Ultimately they will get a chance to run their business successfully, because the capital involvement is very less and they no need to worry about other things. So in an informal sector, you can enter easily, you can start up a business with less capital, and if you are running successfully, that will be of much help both for the individual who is running that particular business, because he is getting a livelihood, and it will also help the tourist in a positive manner, because the tourist will be happy because they get a good service and at a cheap rate they are getting it. So they will be happy in contributing to that sector. Training is also not required to that much extent for the individual. The individual learn it in the course of life. Suppose there may be some people, those who are involved in cooking the food, they are learning it right from the beginning. So I am seeing my mother how she cooks, and the same thing I can follow and I can cook the food. And they are also learning it from the social institution such as the family. They are a part of the family. So in the family they see how the food is being prepared, and the same manner can be followed and it can be served to the guest. For easy understanding, I have kept certain photographs so you can see that and you can understand how the informal sector in the industry is getting operated. Especially once when an individual think to give anything for the tourist, that too under the informal sector, he may be interested in opening a small restaurant or a eating joints where he can provide certain food items for the consumer, exclusively the tourist, so that he does not require any huge investment. You can see how they are utilizing a small space, a small vehicle, or a day-to-day affairs of a small hut. It can also be used in this particular situation for starting an informal sector, and they can prepare something and they can offer it to the tourist, so that during the peak season, during the peak tourist season, the crowd will be pulled towards such shops and they may run their business successfully. It is for your understanding, we have kept certain photographs, so on seeing that you can understand it further. People producing jewelry, art and craft using production techniques are also coming under this informal sector, because they have not changed their technology for generation. They are using those primitive methods and they are producing such art and craft, and they are bringing it to a tourist destination and they are selling it. Such businesses are also coming under the informal sector of tourism industry, if you see this, there the technology or the techniques what was followed by their forefathers, they are still following it. They are putting up their stalls, they are sitting there, they are manufacturing those goods with less technology and they are selling it directly to the tourists. So thereby they are earning a livelihood and the tourists are also getting the cheap product. The people engaged in this sector produces simple utilitarian objects or the musical instruments, though they are not using any complex technology here. They does not have that particular working capital investment or a huge investment is not there. So with the help of the techniques what they have followed for a longer time, they are producing certain items and they are putting it for the sale where the tourist will be attracted. So such things are also coming under the informal sector. Fixed capital need may be less, but the slow rate of turnover in the informal sector leads to the requirement of considerable working capital per unit of output. So once when you see, I am not using the technology to produce certain goods under informal structure, but what is happening? I am producing it continuously, but the slow rate of turnover is there, because in this business we cannot make huge investment. We are not producing it by the mass production methods. So the movement of the capital or the movement of the goods may be very slow in the informal structure, and because of that considerable working capital per unit of output may be more. So you have to understand this concept very clearly. To start an informal sector service, you no need huge capital, but the working capital requirement may be more because of the slow turnover. So you have to understand this. For that you can successfully run the informal sector business. It is estimated by NSSO that 84.7% of job in Indian economy are in the informal sector. You can see just vast amount of people, that huge amount of people, they are involved in the informal sector rather than in the formal sector. So by this itself you can understand how much it is important for our nation. 84.7% of the total job, that means if 100 people are employed, near about 85% of the people are involved in this informal sector in the Indian economy. So once again the photographs will help you to understand what sort of, see in the first slide you can see a man artisan working along with the jewelry or art in that. Then the musical instruments are also produced and certain services are given to the tourist. So this forms a part of the informal sector in the tourism businesses. So if you are thinking about starting up such services, you can very well start with a less capital and we can slowly you can develop your business. No need of huge capital investment or no need of much of your time also. So if you invest your time and money properly in a very little manner, and if you start up a business in the informal sector, slowly that will bring you a lot of profit over a period of time. Now we will understand the nature of the informal sector in this slide. The size and industrial legislation decides the difference between the formal and informal establishment. So the industrial legislation, that means the rules and regulation of the industries, it also helps us to differentiate between the formal and informal sector. Informal sector operate without legal recognition and are neither registered nor officially taxed. So this is the thing what we have to understand in the informal sector, that we can operate a business in the informal sector without legal recognition, no need to get permission from many of the authorities, neither registered nor officially taxed. So whatever income it is being generated, it is not taxed here. So it becomes easy for the common man to think of any services has to be provided, I can go and start up in an informal mode, so that it comes under the informal sector and we are doing a contribution to the tourist visiting that particular destination. At that same time the individual is earning certain amount of money. So starting up of informal sector businesses are very easy rather than thinking of starting an industry or certain production unit under the formal sector. Unit less than or equal to certain size measured by the number of employees. So in the coming slide we will be showing about how many employees are minimum required in the formal sector, what is the rules and regulation. If you have certain number of employees less, that comes under the informal sector. So you no need to worry about this size the main thing once when you are starting up in the informal sector, the size will be very small, and sometimes it is a one or few individuals they can come together, they can start about the informal sector services or operation. Data availability also plays a vital role in deciding the formal and the informal sector. So the data whatever we are using for our research, that also decides the formal and informal sectors. Then based on the number of data collected, then central statistical organizations also give certain amount of data, and with the help of the data we are deciding whether that comes under the formal structure or under the informal sector, and it covers for the enterprises which provide those data. So once when we collect the data and when we analyze the data, and on that analysis also we can decide whether this will be coming under the informal sector or under the formal sector. Based on the data collected by the Central Statistical Organization, Ministry of Planning, Government of India in 1983-84, hotel and restaurants cover the enterprise which provide. So we are going to see the main differences based on the data which is collected by the Central Statistical Organization, which comes under the Ministry of Planning. First one is the lodging services with or without arrangement for meals, other prepared foods and restaurants. That is example, the hotels, the dharamsalas, the hotels provide lodging houses, etc. So once when we are collecting the data, we collect it and so we will see whether they are offering any food services or they have any arrangement for meals or provide the prepared foods and the refreshment from their outlets. So if they are providing it, then that comes under that particular lodging services with or without arrangement. So while collecting the data itself, we will see whether they have any setup for the preparation of food or whether they can provide the prepared food and refreshment through their outlets. So that falls under the lodging services. So while collecting the data itself, we used to collect these data so that it will be helpful for us for the analysis. Then second thing is eating and or drinking services such as prepared meals, food and refreshment, cold or hot drinks, etc. So restaurants, cafeteria, snacks bars and ice cream outlets, they comes under this particular thing because they provide the services which are related there. The meals are sometimes already prepared and that is being provided in the counter. So we used to calculate it under this eating or drinking services. So once when you collect the data, it will be very much helpful for us. We have to collect it meticulously so that we can help out in the differentiation whether that comes under the informal sector or whether it is to be decided as a restaurant or a lodge or any other things which comes under the informal sector. So now the enterprises are divided into three types, that also we are going to see. Own account enterprises, so here operate without the help of any hired workers. So suppose if I am involved, my family members are involved in that particular business, so we are calling it as own account enterprise. Here there is no involvement of workers. I am not hiring the workers or I am not keeping the workers from other than my family members. So I will be operating it with help of my family members. So we are not hiring anyone else from outside. So in that case, it will be called as own account enterprises. It will be operated by the family members. Either one or two will come together and they will be operating it. That comes under the own account enterprises. Second one is directory establishment, that is having 6 or more workers including both household and hired ones. Suppose if there are 6 people or more, that includes both they are hired or from the same household. So if it is there, that comes under the directory establishment. Then non-directory establishment, having less than 6 workers including both household and hired. So here that is less than 6, that comes under the non-directory establishment. If 6 people are involved and less than 6 people involved, they can be both hired or from that particular workforce. So it comes under the non-directory establishment. Then nature of informal structure, hotel enterprise which provide temporary lodging accommodation with or without arrangement for meals, other prepared foods and restaurants. So once again, the hotel, if you call it as a hotel, then that is also a temporary lodging or accommodation with or without the arrangement for meals. other prepared foods and restaurants. So their people will be providing certain accommodation facilities with or without arrangement of food. Food can be either prepared or it can be arranged from other places also. So there once again the difference is there. 88% of total establishment in the hotel and restaurant sector in the Indian economy belong to the informal sector. So if you consider the hotel or restaurant, it is an important part in the tourism industry, and in that 88% of that entire particular hotel and restaurant, it is coming under the informal sector in the tourism. So you can see the importance of the informal sector in the tourism business. Informal sector is predominantly in the restaurant business and marginally in the hotel business. So it is dominated in the restaurant segment and it is less when in compared to that of the hotel businesses. So then comes the productive capital, emoluments and profit. This is also very important once when you want to set up an informal sector. So how that is the productive capital, then emoluments and the profit, you should have a little bit idea about all these things. Productive capital is the sum of the value of fixed asset and working capital. What is then fixed asset? Fixed asset, an asset that is not consumed or sold during the normal course of business. For example, if you want to see the building, machinery, refrigerators, room cooling machines, then lighting equipments, furnitures and fixtures, then transport equipments, all comes under this particular thing. So you cannot sell this as a product during that particular business. Then what comes the working capital? What comes under the working capital? Money available to a company for day-to-day operation comes under the working capital. That is capital involved in stock of foods, drinks, crockery, etc. It will be coming or it will be calculated under the working capital. Informal sector enterprise have a low productive capital, that you have to understand. Here the working capital requirement will also be less because of the informal sector industry. Then emoluments, then the payment to the work in the form of money or something else of value, that will be coming under the emoluments. This includes the salaries, then the wages and the allowance, bonus paid, contribution to the social security, etc. comes under this particular emoluments. Then the profit, money that is earned in trade or business after paying the cost of production and selling goods or services, will be coming under the profit. So when you are in the business, once when you have to idea how to calculate the profit, that becomes very important. Then only at the end of the day you can see that you have earned the profit or you have run into the loss. Then the differential probability between the formal and informal sectors is profit per enterprise is seen to rise with the amount of productive capital. In the formal sector has a high productive capital base. The productivity of labor is much higher in the formal sector rather than in the informal sector. So here you have to be very careful what comes under the profitability between the formal and informal sector, how to differentiate with the help of the productivity or the profitability. Then the capital labor ratio is higher in the formal sector, making it more capital intensive than the informal sector. Cultural division of labor is found in informal sector. Low status job are provided by those who termed as the socially inferior. So the main problem in the informal sector is the low status job are done by the people who are belong to a particular caste or the particular class. So informal sector has become divided into self-contained segment, non-competing groups of workers. So once the certain jobs, they will be done only by certain caste people or class people, that becomes a great hurdle for us in the informal sector. Informal sector in tourism is not fully explored. That is another problem. And so under the tourism businesses, there are a lot many informal sector establishment, but we are not able to put it in the nutshell and see, because a lot of research is still pending, we can see. Certain services offered in informal sectors are dominated by certain caste or community and created by a way of segmentation in informal sector. So if I belong to a particular caste or community, I cannot enter into the informal sector and provide certain services to the tourist, because that particular job or that particular service does not belongs to people those who are from my community or caste or class. So there is a difference. Social and institutional constraint restrict option of many workers. So they cannot perform that, even though they are willing to do that particular job, they cannot take that particular job because they are prevented from doing so. Low status and low wage jobs are taken up through they have educational qualification, they have a lot of interest, they have an idea, but they cannot or they are not permitted to take that particular job. Mobility within the informal structure is restricted. So if I do a particular job, I am not allowed to do another job because I am restricted because of certain conditions. Low status jobs are done by those who are termed as socially inferior. So that is another societal problem where we have to be very careful, because only low status jobs are permitted by certain class or certain group of people. Type of job done is historically determined by the custom, and it is unresponsive to the economic force. Even though the people are interested, they are willing, but they are not permitted because of such condition. Informal sector has become divided into self-contaminated segment, and more competing groups of workers, non-competing groups of workers are there. It is all because of this particular issues. The informal sector, especially under the tourism businesses, are still lacking behind. So once when we want to develop a tourism in the nutshell, then we have to think about the informal sectors. So that sector has to be given more concentration, more support, then only the people can do those businesses under the informal sector and can reap the benefit. So in concluding this, we have learnt about the types of activities, the nature of informal sector, the productive capital, emoluments and profit, the social factor in the informal sector. Thank you, student. Thank you very much.